Hey everyone, welcome to Improv Informer. I'm your host, Anthony Francis, and today's guest, I am very excited. He's an improviser based out of Norwich, UK. He studied under Dogface Improv, the Nursery, Hoopla, and has been coached by improvisers from all over the world. He now coaches for Dogface Improv and plays on the main stage in such teams as the Improvised Play and the Comediasians, the UK's first all-Pan-Asian improv team. Everybody, Jon Nguyen. Hey, Jon.
Hey, Anthony, how are you?
I'm good. I nailed my intro, so I feel really good now.
Right.
I feel really good. It's all downhill from here. Well, thanks so much for joining me and for being on this. I was introduced to you by David, and he said that you're great. So I'm excited to talk to you and find out about what's going on with improv in the UK. So how are things over there? What's going on?
Oh, okay. So, I mean, depending on where people listen, I guess there was or is a pandemic going on. So the UK scene has changed quite rapidly because of that. So I'm going to give you a bit of a snapshot of what my understanding is, because obviously everything I say is my opinion and my understanding. Talking to another improviser a different day, they'll give you a different answer. So before the pandemic happened, I would say a lot of improv was happening in London. London being the big hub, the big multicultural melting pot that is the capital of the UK, where there are multiple improv schools that are happening there. And time is moving on from that centralized bit. So I know of places that are like in Norwich, where I am, there's an improv scene happening. There's also Birmingham and Bristol and Leicester. These are all places that are in the UK, people who don't know where they are, and Brighton and all these sort of things. And so we're getting to a stage where we are becoming more spread out across the country. And of course, and every year we have the biggest art festival up until this year, the biggest art festival in the whole of the world, the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, where a lot of improvisers have their starts. A lot of them have their shows they do there. So it really is a big growing thing that is happening here. And then the pandemic hit. And so everything stopped. And for a time, a lot of people were going, well, we'll wait until we can come back onto stages before we do anything. And then weeks went by and nothing happened. And some schools got on this much quicker than others. And we'll start offering online classes, online drop-ins, online courses, then online shows. And now, so there's that community now in the UK where we are now realizing we're not just one country of improv any longer. We're now communicating across the world. So I've been in classes with the Nursery, for example. I do classes with them, taking classes. And I've seen people from America and from India and from Mexico and Spain and all over the world. And we're realizing that improv across the world, there are enough similarities that bring us together. Like the whole thing about the whole cheesiness of yes and does exist across the world, basically, Anthony. So you realize that
is so great to hear. It is terrible that this whole thing has caused this to happen, but it is wonderful to hear that. That makes me want to jump right into more online classes, and that's something I'm trying to do more of, jams and mixers, like just get in there and just play with everybody from around the world. Like this sounds like something I have to do. Okay, awesome, cool, yeah.
Yeah, that's where we are at the community moment, and I think it's easing off now. So we're going back to, I know Hoopla, one of the schools I work with, where they stay shows, they're now doing what they call Park Prov, where they're doing improv at 2 meter distance in the open air in the parks, in London and Brighton. But at the moment, online is still going. Well, now we're hitting the summer, August. And August is traditionally a time in the UK. I don't know what it's like in America. Because the festival is normally on, the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, everything shuts down improv-wise pretty much across the country, apart from low-level sort of stuff. Well, not low-level, apart from local stuff necessarily, because most people would be going to Edinburgh. It's just, losing money there. But that's not happening this year. But people are still taking the time to break, because summer's a nice time to be outside, not so online. But I'm still taking classes online. I'm still doing rehearsals with my groups online. And it's a great way for me to really sort of connect with them and be with them. So at the moment we are in the UK, we are wanting to grow. We're wanting to go much faster. And this is a great time in a way. The pandemic was a horrible thing, but it's made us realize how much we have not made it accessible or spread out across the country as we could, if that makes sense. And it's one of those sort of things that sometimes you need something big to make you realize we could be doing more to make it more inclusive for people of age, of race, gender, and race and all those sort of things. And we're taking that time now, because rather than being people who are having to rely on classes to make money constantly, we're going, oh, well, we're now taking time to look at our class and go, what can we do to make it better for everybody? So I'm hoping at the end of this, on the other side, we are going to be a much better community, not only locally, but worldwide, I feel. And that's because that's a wonderful feeling. I've really talked a lot, so I'm glad you say something now in between.
That's fine. I remember I that's why I did all that talking at the beginning, because I want to hear from you. I was off camera, I just telling him my whole life story. So well, that's great to hear, though. It's great to hear that the community's coming together, and it's so funny. It's well, not, I don't want to say funny, but I think it's wonderful. The improv community of all the communities is the first to go. We have to, ever, like the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter movement, the improv community is always the first to be like, hey, we need to clean house now. We need to fix our problems. We need to make sure that and it is, but by almost, it's one of the most inclusive communities, but it's always the first community, I feel like, and maybe that's just because I'm in it, but it's the first community to be like, we got to audit ourselves, self-audit right now. And I think that's great, because we're constantly looking at ourselves and going, what can we do to make ourselves a better community, a more inclusive community? Because as much as we think we're inclusive, there's so much more. We could always dig down. We can always say, hey, are we including everyone? I'm excited for this time too, because what you're telling me sounds great, because I'm very locked in the American culture. I don't get other cultures. It's not like, I think you can take like a 20-minute train ride. You're in Germany. Like you're close to other, Italy is like, where Texas is for me. So it's like, I don't know if that's true, but it's close enough. And it's like, I want to be able to meet the rest of the world and do improv with the rest of the world, mainly because improv is my language. So it's like, I want to be able to speak to everyone in that language. We all speak the same language, like music. So what is, I'm so interested. I want to ask you this now. What are the, so you're in the UK's first Pan-Asian improv team, and it's called Comediasians.
Yep.
And what is that like? Yeah, how is that, and how is it? Is there any difference to it, or how did it get started? What's that team about?
So I'm not a founding member. Bruce Tang was basically the driving force behind it. And I'm going to give a bit of history. So in the UK, Hoopla facilitates something called Do the Right Scene, which was London's and probably UK's first all-black improv team. And then they invited other ethnicities, so Asians. We came along, we started doing it. And I think Bruce realised that Asians are hilarious. They're funny people, but there's no one coordinating them anyway. So I believe, and he may tell me that I'm wrong in this, when this interview goes out, he listens to it hopefully, that he just put a call out going, if you do improv and you are Asian or you identify as Asian, contact me and we'll form a team. And that was basically the basis of it. Cool. And he was surprised, I think, and how many people there were, because when you are doing just going to a regular show like every month, like it sounds a bit like I'm talking like the film Hairspray, when you have like that one day a month when it's like the non-white kids doing the show. It's a bit like that. You just saw a few people, and then when you realize that friends of friends of friends of friends, and there were, before you knew, I think about something between 15 and 20 of us in the Comediasians over a few months.
Wow.
And it was like, and it was just a case of a time for us to play together and see if we bond together, and it was like an unapologetic way of being yourself. And there's no slight on any other group that I've ever been with or anything else like that. But when you are in a group of people who understand, or at least have some idea of your culture, and even though we are multiple different cultures, we're not talking like, I'm Vietnamese, for example. There are people who are Chinese, there are people who are Indian, and there are people of all different Asian cultures in there, that exist in the group. But you realize there are certain differences in culture. And one of the things that made me want to join this group was my wife. She had, in the context, she hates improv. She doesn't understand it at all. Okay, she's never watched any of my shows and refuses to do so. But not because she doesn't find it worthwhile art. It's just she doesn't get any of the references. She understands English, but doesn't go, well, why is that funny? I don't understand why you're mentioning, I don't know, like Nike, like selling ice cream instead of shoes, like a random thing like that. She doesn't understand because it's not a thing that she references. But if I did an improv set where I referenced my third uncle being, unruly towards my second cousin, she would get that because family's a much bigger thing culture-wise, and there's much more nuances in Vietnamese culture for family than there are in English culture. Like, for example, in Vietnamese, there's no word for cousin. Everyone's a brother or sister.
Oh.
And so if I said the word cousin in front of her, she wouldn't understand what that means. And it, in itself, excludes a whole swathe of people, I think, when you assume that all improv is Western culture, whose lines it anyway, style, like IO, American, like this sort of thing. This is how you do it, effectively.
Right.
But a lot of Asians, I talked to them, and me included, were terrified of bringing our own references into a British show because we didn't know if people understand it or not. And talking to my friend like David Escobedo, who we are mutual friends with, he said, "Bring yourself." That's the thing, and I agree with that. With improv, you are who you are. Bring your own culture. You can bring in something, and if you don't understand it, that's fine. But it's you understand it, and someone else may get with that. I mean, one person in the audience who really understands if I said pho is a lovely breakfast meal I have every day. Not everyone realizes that pho is like a big noodle dish, like that sort of thing. But then one would go, "Yep, I understand that. When I was in Vietnam, I had that every day." Like, it's like one of those sort of things that you shouldn't have to pander to the mass of an audience for improv. You should do what feels true to you for the people who will understand it. And not everyone will get everything. And that's fine.
No, and that's great, though, I think. I think that's the best thing about improv. Like, I remember watching an improv show where one of the guys, they're having a conversation, and the one guy's eating he's eating a cheeseburger, and he goes, well, the cheeseburger is just an example of corporate. It was basically saying that that the cheeseburger was marketed so that all of these different products could be stacked together and sold together. And it was just an interesting kind of concept. And that's a kind of like, that's the only thing I could think of that popped in my head. But my point is, I came into that show not knowing that or ever thinking about my cheeseburger in that way. And I left the show with something new. And I think that's what every great improv show, you always walk away going, I didn't know about that thing, that little piece of information, or like, what is that food? I mean, you mentioned a new food. And if there's one thing I have to do with food I've never had is I have to put it in my mouth. So this is great. So it's like, it's a Vietnamese dish and you've got like, okay, wow, I want to try that. Like, like, what is this about? So I think that's great that you bring that. It would be awful if we got together to cook food together and you brought all the spices that I already have in my own spice rack. Like, that would suck. Yeah. So I think that's great. Wow. That's awesome. Any other cultural differences? I remember reading an article one time about improv in, I want to say it was China, and they or Japan. I know those are completely different places, but I can't remember where it was. But they said that because the culture has a group mentality, that individualism is looked at as bad and going with the group is looked at as good. Is that correct? And does that play in improv in any way that you may have seen?
So I don't know a huge amount about Chinese or Japanese culture, but I do understand there are concepts of self and individuality that don't work out. My friend of mine, who is a lovely friend, Paul. Oh, my camera's dropped. Sorry.
Oh no.
I'm just gonna fix this.
It's all good.
So my friend Paul, he's a white man, but he did improv in China for a while. He was out there, and he was telling me about how there are certain things that they couldn't say because they were on a Chinese TV show, and they couldn't talk about certain aspects of being a self-individual. Like, that person can't be more important than someone else. It wasn't allowed because no one would watch it. It wouldn't be broadcast. So it's an interesting thing you bring up. That there are things that you shouldn't say or can't say, and it's weird that you think in improv in a way that everything should be possible. Everything should be. But again, I reference my wife. She understands certain concepts, and she watches the show, which is basically improvised, but she doesn't understand that it's improvised. It's like a bawdy sort of comedy sort of thing. People come on stage, the wife berates the husband constantly, that sort of thing, and they hit certain beats. There's certain like familiarity bits of it, like a bit like Punch and Judy. If you know what Punch and Judy is, the doll thing. I don't know if that's a particularly British thing I'm talking about, but so it's like
I'm not fully aware of that.
So yeah, basically there are certain tropes, like watching It's like watching Friends, the TV show Friends. Those
Mm-hmm.
are dated now, but there are certain aspects you go, Joey's being a womanizer. You understand that beat. You understand that's going on there.
Gotcha.
There are certain
Okay. Yeah.
characters
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
will get. But in this show, the bits that get in between are still improvised. But she sort of doesn't understand that and that sort of thing. And if you reference someone going against the family in any way in a Vietnamese culture play, that's a villainous thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because you never disrespect the family. And that sort of thing. And there's some things you would never do in an improv show in Vietnamese that, to my knowledge, I've never done or seen. Public displays of affection. Vietnamese culture, PDA is not generally allowed. Like, it just doesn't happen. My wife and I would never do PDA in any way. Even in Britain, we just don't do it. It doesn't happen. And it's a concept, and it's a concept that's also going like, it's going to be weird. Say it out loud. Vietnamese people, to my knowledge, the ones I know, and not everyone, generalizing here, hate the sun. Right? They will always cover up everything, put masks on, hats on, everything like that sort of thing. But it's one of those sort of things that if you did that in a British culture, it'd be weird. You think it's out of the ordinary. It'll be a weird sort of thing. But in Vietnamese culture, it's perfectly normal. So if you do a Vietnamese culture show where someone's sunbathing, that is funny to them because it's not something they would ever do. But if you do a sunbathing show in England, that's perfectly normal. People. That's not funny. That's not weird. It's not out of the ordinary. That's not the weird thing that brushes against the norm.
Yeah.
So those sort of cultural stones are things that I think about a lot when doing improv. Like even the classic one I always think about is Christianity church versus a Buddhist temple. They're both, to a certain degree, religious practices, but they've got very different things to it. So example, Vietnamese and I think Chinese culture, you do this 3 times with incense, right? I know what that means, okay, and that sort of thing, and it's a shortcut way of going like we're in a religious place. Whereas if you were doing a church thing, you may have to do like a bit further down, that sort of thing to know it's a different cultural sort of thing. And it's interesting that my mind, because I was brought up in the UK, but I have a very Vietnamese background. My parents were both Vietnamese. They were refugees from Vietnam when they came to UK. So I have all these different things going on in my head at once. And I'm trying to work out which one I think is best for me in the scene. When I first started doing improv, I was thinking, well, what would the audience understand more? And now I've grown as an improviser. I think, well, the audience are smart people. They're smarter than I give them credit for, generally speaking, now. So I'll do what I think is real to me because I'm doing much more real grounded improv. And sometimes they might not get it, which is fine. Perhaps that will spark a conversation for them later. Perhaps they will get it and go, oh, I do understand that. Or sometimes it goes like, I come to going, what was that? Can you tell me more about that? And that's a conversation worth having. And I think improv for me is not so much about the performance, but more about the community and about the learning and the shared experience of it. And
that's great. I think that's such a good point to never think that your audience isn't smart. If the audience is brilliant, and if they don't get a reference, or they don't get like what you're talking about, or if they've never experienced it, they're learning then they're like, oh, okay, I might not know this thing, but at least I'm getting introduced to something new. The worst thing we can do for an audience is be predictable. I think if we're talking about, putting butts in seats, selling tickets and paying the rent, but you know what I mean? But like when it comes to the act of improv, it's more like, do you be in the moment and just whatever comes to mind, because the second we start going, ooh, is the audience going to get what I'm about to do? Then we're no longer flying. We're no longer, we're tied down. We're no longer free to do what we want to do. And I think that it hurts the process. What does improv feel like for you?
Oh, improv. It's like having another language. For me, it's like, I feel that I can talk in the language of improv to another improviser and they will get me. Like, I could do improv in Vietnamese and someone could do it in Polish and we would still do a lovely scene. It would still work because we would, yes, and everything. We'd go, yep, I know exactly what you're saying. We'll still go over it. Even if the words were like, if they were trying to tell me off for selling off my shoes and I go, yep, I love you too. Here's a hamburger. Yeah. The audience, unless they speak the language, they would never know. But that's the thing about improv. It's like in my case, a third or fourth language in my head that I can use.
That's great. That's
And
great. That yeah.
that's what it is for me. It's more about community. I said before, more about community and inclusivity than it is about entertainment. Though I like melding the two. But if I had to choose to go, right, improv is got a bit to help people with mental health, people help feel more comfortable, more inclusive. That's what I'll do. You know, if that's the case, and that's what I would prefer. But obviously, entertainment is also very entertaining as well. So whenever you can bring both things together, it is like, you know, like a beautiful symphony in my head.
That's great. I feel the same way. Like, I love a great audience applause. I love when the audience laughs. And I love that cheer / laugh. That's the goal. But if I had to pick one, you're right. I've had better experiences, or I've had more, I can count more rewarding experiences, truly, fully, spiritually rewarding experiences through improv that happened either in the classroom or with a group of people in a room that had no audience. It was just people playing together. That's where I feel like the real magic is for me. If I had to pick one, I would absolutely pick just, you know, playing with people in a room someplace, because the stage is, I feel like that's almost secondary in a way. Of course I would be lying if I said I didn't live for it.
We all like those moments when there's a big laugh or a big gasp of air going, he said that, like, you know, that sort of moment.
Right. So tell me about this other, you're in the improvised play. So how does that, what's that format like, or that structure? Or if there is one, how does that work?
Okay, so improvised play was, I auditioned for it a couple of years ago, and I'll give you a bit of background on the group. The group is an amazing group. Within this group of about 10 people, we have, you know, people who are Polish, people who are Belgian, we have white women, Indian men, myself, a transgender male is in the group as well, people who are non-neurotypical. We are like amazing, multicultural, multifaceted group. And that was never the intention. It's just come away that way because what we are is a grounded sort of group, basically. And the idea was that we would put on a improvised theatrical play in the style of a playwright. So for our first year, we did Carol Churchill, who was a British playwright, very modern British culture, doesn't do things always in the right order and that sort of thing. It's all very much about the feeling of the play. And went to Edinburgh Fringe Festival with it last year, and we had a great time. And this year, we plan to go to Edinburgh Fringe Festival with the style of Tennessee Williams. So we'd have deep Southern accents, big old white linen outfits, and with sets and everything. It was wonderful. And we all read the plays as much voracious as possible and pick out what we think is the bones of that playwright. And then we'd also have a coach come in and talk us about it. And for us, at least for me, from my perspective of it all, it's about making, for Tennessee Williams, making the audience feel something that they also feel. Because Tennessee Williams, and I did not know this, and this is me being quite ignorant, Tennessee Williams was a gay man. I did not realize that he was a homosexual when I first started reading his plays. I never studied and didn't realize about. And then when you realize that, you realize how much of his plays are about people coming out and how many people are repressed in it. And you talk about the violent nature sometimes towards women in it, and like the menace that happens, especially in Streetcar Named Desire, the big classic with Stanley shouting Stella, and like, you know, that like relationship is abusive, is not abusive. And you think to yourself, well, he wants to show his life on stage. So this we feel like we should show our lives on stage to a certain degree, and then that would hopefully resonate with the audience.
So you're not trying to follow Tennessee Williams showing his life on stage by playing characters that are repressed. You're trying to show your life on stage. So if your character isn't necessarily repressed, but has maybe some other issues, you almost want to bear some of that on stage.
I think it's a big combination of both. Because we do the recognizable Tennessee Williams, all the tropes about there, and we do have like repressed gay characters, you know, with that sort of thing. We have relationships and like all the recognizable places, but also we're not Tennessee Williams. That's the thing. We will never be that, you know, amazing playwright that existed.
And he also was able to edit. So it was, you're not Tennessee Williams, and you're not Tennessee Williams off the cuff. So it's just like,
But so we do all the recognizable things, but then, we do bring ourselves into it. We tell our own, we tell it from our point of view and our stories to a certain degree. And the audience, being the audience, because we're playing characters, they'll never know what is us and what's not us and what we've made up and what we've not made up. And it's one of those sort of feelings that it took a while for me to get to that realization, especially in this, because we worked very close together. We do intimacy classes, and we in the play we do kiss, and we do lie down in bed, and we do like let the lights fade down as we're holding each other and that sort of thing. Very intimate sort of things that you wouldn't normally do with a brand new, like a jam. I would never do the stuff I could do with them with a jam.
Sure.
But I feel very safe that I can kiss someone on stage in a tender way, or I can like do a stage fight with someone if I need to. Not there's a lot of stage.
Right. So stage fighting, intimacy training. So these improvised plays are these aren't just comedy. There's a lot of other ranges of emotion that will happen in this show. Yeah.
Yeah, and
cool.
It's interesting because I've always seen improv as improvised theatre. That's always how it's been in my head. I've never really thought about it as comedy. Although, admittedly, a lot of things are funny because, in my experience with improv, and it's probably for you, Anthony, as well, if you go for a joke, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't land because it's funny in your head. The timing is wrong. The audience aren't ready for it.
No.
But this is why I teach my students. The comedy of the familiar is what the audience like. If they see something, if you do like an angry boss against like an angry boss falls over, like that sort of thing. Yep, I wish my boss fell over. People will laugh at that. It's the laugh of recognition, or it's a laugh.
I pay to watch that over and over again, personally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, I agree with you. I always say comedy's like a deer in the woods. She's got to come to you. Like you can't chase after it. You can't squeeze it. You can't force it to do what you want it to do. The second you try, you fail. And not that good fail, but I mean like the second you try, the second you want it, the second you go for it, it's just gonna fall apart. And that's what that's what I love about comedy, is because it's like this force of nature that you really don't get to control. You have to roll with it, and it happens when it happens. And I still don't know how to describe it because it's just one of those. It's so slippery.
It is. It's one of those. You're right. It's one of those things you can never grasp onto it, and people ask you to describe it, and you do your best to describe it, and it's never quite the same description ever twice, because either your understanding has evolved, or you didn't quite understand it in the first place. It's like it's there. But talking of improvisers, you feel the same way.
I always think of the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Yeah.
Where he's like, you could slip the cuffs at any time. Well, only when it's funny. Like I only have the magic when I have the magic, and I can't call upon the magic. I have to just wait for the magic to come. And it's like, if it's a funny bit, it's going to work and I'll be able to slip the cuffs. I can do amazing things when the magic is here. When the magic isn't here, I'm a complete idiot. Tell me about teaching. How is that? When did you start teaching, and what is that experience like for you?
So I started teaching about just over maybe a year and a half ago. And it was a case of the person from Dogface, Chris Reed, lovely man. He just said to me one day, have you ever thought about coaching? And I thought, you know what, I like the idea of it. Never really gave it any sort of serious consideration because I'm happy taking classes, happy doing the shows that we've been doing. And it was a case of, he took me under his wing, basically. He sort of helped me, let me do some drop-ins, and then shadowed me in a course and a couple of courses and that sort of thing. And he sort of wanted to make sure, and it's not a bad thing, to make sure that I wasn't teaching something outside of the school's ethics, in a sense. Yeah. And I'm not saying that I would ever do that, but it's his school, obviously. You want to make sure you're doing that. And it's lovely. It's a wonderful thing because I get to impart what I've learnt over my time to people who may not know anything about improv at all. And it's fun to try to explain from my point of view. And in that process, you learn a lot. You learn about, that's what I got from this. That makes sense. So I can tell someone else about it. Or because like Game of the Scene, one of those things that you hear phrase-wise. And it took me a long time to understand Game of the Scene. Even then, I'm not entirely sure I can explain it succinctly. But it's one of those sort of things that, it's like a repeated pattern behavior that is funny, or you find a thing that's different against the norm. All these things are true, but you've got to try to explain it. And the other thing I've learned is that you can't ever stop learning, because I still continue to this day take classes, and frankly across the world now. I can do it anywhere with people. Because I get to learn perhaps a new skill or relearn something that I've forgotten. Because when you teach, you sometimes forget basics in your head, and it's worth sometimes just going back through. This is what yes and means, or this is what listening means, or this is what group mind means, that sort of thing, or a slightly different interpretation of it. And also you get to be with different people every time, and you get to experience the joy of being something new and fun. Going, oh, I'll remember that experience. So when I teach someone else, going, this is how I felt. This is hopefully this will also resonate with you. Because the other thing about teaching, I'm sure you know, Anthony, is that everyone learns in a different way at a different pace. And it's a case of not just because I got something the first time I learnt it, doesn't mean my student will. I never got to think, oh, okay, I've got to make sure as clear as possible where you all go around a different way perhaps about it. Or if they feel uncomfortable doing this exercise, find different exercise behind it. And that process in itself is fascinating. And you learn a lot about yourself as a person and teacher and improviser. And sometimes you learn lessons that you never thought you would learn yourself. And this is brilliant. Like what they've done is amazing. And they've done it. And that sense of achievement and pride and wonder is what I look for in teaching in a sense. And it's wonderful working with all people, all walks of life. And I love feeling that people are happy to be in my presence and to learn things from me. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I feel the same way. 100%. Yeah. I feel the exact same way because I have one student sticks out in my mind where when he first started doing improv, it was like, well, I like you too, and I'm just like, I was like, oh my God, what are you doing? I thought there was no hope for him. But then one day, just a random class, just like any other day, just grinding it out. He does an amazing scene, patient, wasn't going for the joke, just did the scene. And I went, oh my God. And then to this day, he's gotten so good. And I just like, part of me feels almost guilty because part of me in my mind was like, this person's never going to get better. And that was that was a long time ago. Because of that story, I know now that no matter what you think about a student, if they keep showing up, they will get better. They will, and it has nothing to do with you so much as it has to do with them showing up all the time and keeping at it and doing it. That's you're right. That's such a rewarding feeling. Have you ever gotten frustrated with your students? Does that happen to you?
No, I've never felt that about a student.
Me neither. Good night, everybody.
I mean, I've seen someone like perhaps not fully listen to what I've said, perhaps, or they've not listened to the other groups, but like to other, they're all still trying to go for the joke. And I think to myself, well, again, people learn different rates, and I do not know why they're doing that, but I just keep gently pushing the way I can. That's all, because what again I'm teaching for is not a performance; it's for inclusivity. And I'm never going to exclude anyone if they're going to they never quite do the exercise the way it should be. Because no exercise. This is something I learned. I can't remember. I think Joe Bernard said this to me once. Like, however they do the exercise is the correct way to do the exercise. Like, just because your way thought you was going the wrong way, going, nope, well they've done it. That's brilliant. That's how it's done. So never just because it hasn't gone the way you think it's going to go in your head. It's like improv, right? It's never going to go the way you think it's going to go. And one of the things I've learned, and this is from my days of playing Dungeons and Dragons, this is one of those phrases that you always hear, like, no amount of dungeon master planning survives player contact.
Right. Yes. The players, and for those of you that don't know about D&D, the dungeon master sets up the game. They set up the challenges. They set up the storyline. There's a room you need. There's a room, or there's like a book on the table that is going to launch the mission, and then everyone else on the team, then now you've got your game players, and all they want to do is do something else, and you got to be like, okay, we're not doing this. Let me go do that. Yeah,
that's the thing.
That's great.
Same process for teaching. If the exercise doesn't go as good, brilliant. There's still a learning opportunity. We'll still learn through that way, and I'll find another activity, another exercise at some point that will, push across a point that I was thinking about, about group mind or yes and or whatever it is. Because again, everyone learns differently, and you can't force your way of learning on anyone. Because some people are visual, some people are tactile, some people are verbal, and you can't plan for a class to have a full class of verbal people. That's not possible. It's literally impossible because you don't know. So you've got to do things in multiple different ways, and then you learn about how you start going, oh, well, that's brilliant. I've never thought about how that works now before. And one of the hardest questions you could ever ask an improv class, and I'm pretty sure this going is how is that for you? It's the worst, because both the best and worst question that any student can have, because they're self-conscious about it, despite the fact they should never feel self-conscious. They should go I hated it. It's fine. I'll accept the answer. But they never want to give that answer. I never hear that answer, but I'm sure they would. Some teacher would go, didn't understand exercise. Why am I doing it? Like, I would love to hear that feedback one day, because then I would change the exercise. But I'm sure every improv teacher in their life has asked that question. So how did you find that? Like, and it's one of those sort of things that in the first few weeks you find no one says anything. And then after like 4 weeks, 5 weeks going, people going, oh, I really enjoyed that. Oh, I didn't quite understand that. And you start realizing, yeah. And it's one of those sort of things that the first week you've got to sort of, right, that's going to be dead air. You've got to understand that question is going to generate crickets the first 10 seconds every time you ask that question. Because everyone's going to look at each other going, no, you talk. No, you talk. I'm not saying anything.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I love when I ask that question. I'm like, so how was that scene for you? How did you feel? They're like, it was fine. I'm like, okay. That's your answer. Like, you know, it's so interesting. Do you find Viola Spolin is a big influence for me? And in her writing, she says, you know, the students are going to look to you to tell them if they're good or bad. And it's our responsibility not to give them that answer, because then they'll point at that and say, my improv teacher said I'm good. My improv teacher said I'm bad. This is why I am bad. And so I always like to leave it to them. And they beg for, what am I doing wrong? They beg for that. And I go, well, I want you to work on these challenges. I want you to do these exercises, or I want you to do improv scenes with these challenges in mind. And then they start to try to reverse engineer the challenge to see what their problem is. And I'm like, don't do that, because sometimes I can't find anything wrong with you, but I can't not give you a challenge. So you don't know, you might be great. You might be perfect, but I can't just be like, and Tommy's perfect, so we're done. Like, you know, do you, what do you find is your, I guess, philosophy with teaching? Like, if you had one sort of thing to pass on to a new improv teacher, what is the one thing that I think that you'd want to say to them?
Okay, so what I've been working with students a lot recently, and one of the things I've discovered is because I've had pub discussion, the classic bar or pub discussion after a class, right?
Yeah, yeah. I missed that. For those of you watching this in the future, a pub is a place humans used to hang out before. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, is that students will always want to pick apart their scenes afterwards, right? They can't help. They love doing that sort of thing. And what I've discovered, and then obviously there are provisos this, because I will explain this in a second, is that people will self-edit before they say anything. They'll go, oh, that's not good enough, that's not funny enough, that's not right. And even to like taking a suggestion, going, right, suggestion's orange, but suddenly I thought of bells, going, I can't say that because it's nothing to do with orange. And I tell my students, whatever you thought of is correct.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't need to be clever witty. The audience doesn't even need to understand it at this point in time. You are learning for a reason. There's no reason. I'm not expecting you to be an improviser now who can go on stage with Colin Mockery tomorrow. That is not the goal of 1-2 hours of classes and that sort of thing. And of course, you know, when I say don't judge what you're going to say, obviously, you know, I don't expect people to be like any ists or isms, like, you know, ageist, racist, you know, those sort of things. Clearly, those things are never going to be right. Never make fun of anyone of who they are. Never be. No one should ever be the butt of someone else's joke. Is how I do it.
Of course, yeah.
But otherwise, it's a case of, if you wanted to say to that person, like, here's a cake, you know, oh, I can't say I don't like cake, but in a sense, you can say you don't like cake. You're not denying the cake exists. You're still saying, yes, and the cake exists, but your character doesn't like cake. That's fine. And then you've got something to hold on to. Because what you at the end we're doing, if you keep self-editing, is that you never have a character. You have a series of lines that you think I want to hear, but that's not a character. A character is how your point of view comes across. And if your mind said, yep, when I think of that cake, I don't like walnuts, brilliant. You don't like walnuts. Yeah. You're not denying the cake exists. You're just saying you don't like walnuts. Yes, and isn't like, yes, I'll eat that cake. Yes, and is, yep, that's definitely a cake. That's fine. That's all it is. Yes, yeah, that's definitely a cake. And here's a spoon for the cake. Or yes, here's a cake, but I've already eaten. That is still yes, and. Like,
yeah,
it's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's I always I start out new students with say yes to everything unless it makes you uncomfortable. Only because I want them to say yes all the time to everything, so that when they do say no, I know that they're not saying it in a sense of denial to the reality or the gifts offered, that sort of thing. But you're right. That's where you get into that weird thing, because it's like, well, if I offer you a cake and you say no, have you denied the gift offered? Well, no. Like, we're still, you know, we could still be family sitting at the kitchen counter. I don't deny any of that, but I do deny this cake.
Yeah. It's not like saying, oh, here's a cake. No, it's actually a banana. That's obviously very different to saying,
yeah,
that sort of thing. So I think the thing is getting students out of their own head, helping to not edit everything they're going to say. Obviously, inappropriate things, yeah, we agree that that's not something they should ever do, and that should be discussion. Every class has like talk about boundaries, talk about what is and is not appropriate at the beginning of every class. Brilliant, I understand that. But otherwise, yeah, it's free reign. You know, if you want to come back and say, "Oh, I'm a dog," brilliant. You'll be a dog in that scene. Don't ever think that being a dog is not good enough. You're always enough, because it's never. We're not.
Great. Yeah,
that's the thing. I talk about Jay Suka, that you are enough. I'm enough. You are enough. That is all we need for the scene to work. Don't think whatever you're going to say is wrong, because you do that. It's like the thing, like it's like when you what's the word? I'm trying to think of an analogy for this. So, for example, when you blank someone in the street, and you think, oh, I should tell them I wasn't blanking, I had a bad day, but you leave it, and you leave it, and you leave it, and you leave it, and you never say anything. Like when you start doing edit, you leave it, and you leave it, and you leave it, and then you never say anything. It's the same thing. Basically, you think you've gone too long, and it could be 3 seconds for the audience, but in your head, it's like it could be an eon of time. So, I tend to find this is why I think things like word association games or word at a time story games are brilliant, because you go, yep, the first thing that comes to your head, and it may be a curveball, but that's your brain, and your brain is a wonderful, magnificent organ that gives you all of these things. And your scene partner, if we've done it talk correctly, will go, yep, that's brilliant. Your brain is wonderful. I love your brain. Here's stuff from my brain. Let's make a wonderful, weird building together. And that's the thing, isn't it? And there's all types of improv in the world. And as you go on your improv journey, like I have done, I can do serious, I can do like the improvised play, I will do musicals, I will do rap workshops, I'll do like short form, long form. It's all about where you go forward from that. But when you're first doing it, just let your brain play. And that's the thing, because it's so freeing. And that's what improv should be about. Accepting everyone who they are and being happy to do that together.
We didn't even get into musical improv. So I love musical improv. What is that? Yeah. How is that for you? For me, it's like this flying kind of just, you just get locked in. I'm more in the zone with musical improv than I am with anything else. And the music directors are what make it so incredible.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how to do it without them. So yeah, how is musical improv? What's that scene like in the UK?
Oh, so there are there's one group that stands out a lot for musical improv. It's called the Showstoppers. They are like, they've got like an Olivier Award, like a London Theatre Award. And they do an improvised musical. And what they do is they do styles of musicals. So you can say Pippin, Les Miserables, Matilda, and they'll do different parts of their musical in that style.
Oh my gosh.
So, all right,
and practice. You got to know all of that. That's a repertoire. You got to know.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Amazing. And I've seen them do and it's fantastic to watch them do that. And then you've got other groups who do musicals as well. And then there's like Track 96 is a rap group, and they do a musical sort of thing as well. And the Maydays who do a gothic musical. They're all wonderful, and music boxes, like loads of them. And I love it. I have a regular musical group in Norwich, which we're just doing fun games, basically. But musical improv is one of those sort of things. It is, when you start, and this is a secret for those who are listening, it's a secret sort of thing. It's like when you start doing it, you think to yourself, I can never do this. 5 hours later going, yep, I'm doing this. And you realize, I know the secrets of this. It's brilliant. But when an audience watches, they're going, how are they doing that? And you're right, it's a musical director. The musical director is like the best improviser you could ever have on stage with you. Like
the work, talk about somebody who could be going down a path and then has to switch things up. I mean, they're not only are they watching the show, but they're watching everything. I can only imagine what is going on in the mind of a music director and an improv show. Like all the things they have to watch. I need to interview a few music directors and ask them these questions. Be like, what are you doing? What is going on? I need to hear it. I need to know. And I want like a cam on their head, and I want a play-by-play. I want to freeze it and be like, at this moment, I changed from this to that, because there's musical math going on. I guess. I don't know how they do that.
Oh no, I was trained. My first training came from the Maydays with Joe Samuel and Heather Urquhart. And Joe Samuel is the musical director of the Maydays, and he is a wonderful, warm human being. And he is the most skilled improviser, basically, because he can make my singing, which is lackluster and basic, sound like I'm singing at the highest possible level. And
there's one of those people who can actually sing in musical improv. The rest are just. And it's fine. It's fine. I don't, there's only been literally maybe 3 people who've given me goosebumps from listening to them sing in musical improv. It's totally fine.
Yeah. And I was taught very much about, and like all improv, effectively, it's about confidence, right? If you you show up and do it, and you do it with confidence, the audience will never know it went wrong. It's one of those sort of things that, again, Jay Suko taught me, like, you play a wrong note in a musical once, everyone notices. You play it wrong 10 times, they go, oh, this is jazz. This is meant to happen. Like, it's the same thing for any sort of improv. Like, you do something wrong once, that's fine. You do it multiple wrong times, it's part of the set. And the other thing I was taught by Andrew Pugden in Showstoppers was, right, this is like, one person dancing is an idiot. 10 people dancing badly is choreography. Like, that's
great.
Those all things in musical.
And jazz is such a great example of yes and, because you know, they hear someone play an off note and they incorporate. So it's there's a lot of improv is in so many different places, so much in music. So I see the connection. You were going to say something, I think, and I cut you off.
No, it's fine. I love musical improv so much. I wish I did more of it, but it's hard to find someone who wants to be musical director, because it's a lot of work, as you say.
They're so hard to find.
Yeah.
And then they're so hard to hold on to.
Yeah,
What's that?
We have a guy up Norwich who does it with us, but we've not done it over Zoom because we just can't find a way to make it work at the moment. It's so hard.
It's too much lag. Yeah, it's tough. Well, we're coming up on the end here. I want to thank you so much for joining us and for joining me and letting us know a little bit more about improv in the UK. Is there anywhere else that we can find you? Where can we watch your stuff? Is there anything online that we could see?
So at the moment, I've just up my own Facebook page for Jon Nguyen Improviser. So you can find me. And what I do on that page is I basically put all stuff going, these people are great, follow their stuff. I'm also doing recently 10 minutes of improv with people around the world. Like people I've met going, do you want to do 10 minutes of improv with me online? And we'll have a little discussion afterwards. I did one just before now, a lady from India called Lakshmi, literally at 2 p.m. BST time, so about 2 hours ago. I did a 10-minute set with her, and it was a very rewarding experience because she's in India and I'm here. I would never have done that in any other way. Yeah. So I've been trying to encourage people to just message me. We'll do 10 minutes of improv. We can do it by ourselves on Zoom, never record it. We can do it, we can record it and show it loud. We can do it live streamed, whatever you want. And that's where you can find most of my stuff at the moment. And I also, as I perform regularly at Hoopla and Nursery, but summer they've closed down for the time being.
Let's say if I wanted to do improv with you, would I just submit?
You just
reach out.
Just email me or send me a message on my Facebook page. You can find me as Jonathan Nguyen on my personal Facebook page. I'm happy to that. Or Jon Nguyen Improviser, which is on my Facebook page, which you can find there. Feel free to do that. If you can find me, much like the A-Team, I will do stuff for you.
Awesome. Yeah. I would never be so forward as to ask on an interview right now, but I will email you.
Yeah, of course.
No, it'd be great.
You and I will do 10 minutes. That will happen.
Yes.
Don't worry. I've said it out loud now.
It's done. It's going to happen. Yeah. All right. Jon Nguyen, everyone. And Jon, thank you so much for being here. And everyone, thank you for watching. And we'll see you next time. All right.
Thank you very much.
See ya.